Good evening, Rabbi. Chodesh Tov, and we're going to discuss tonight the issue of guarding the Berit, which is one of the most important things in the Torah. So important, the issue of guarding the Berit, that really life and death hangs on the issue of the Berit. What does that mean regarding the Berit? What it means is that a person, once he first gets circumcised, obviously a person has to be circumcised, has to get Brit Milah when he's 8 days old. Every Jew, once a person gets Brit Milah, he has to guard that Milah. What does that mean? That a person can have physically the Brit Milah, he got Brit Milah, but because of the sins that he did, he can actually lose the effect of the Brit Milah and comes back on him like a situation where he's not circumcised, spiritually speaking, even though physically speaking he's circumcised. Chazal tell us the first person who actually had a problem with this was the first man, Adam Arishon. They say Adam Arishon, right? Moshech be'orlato haya. What does that mean? That he was a kind of person that even though he was born circumcised, nevertheless they say that he was trying to pull back his milah. What does that mean? He was trying to get into a situation where he shouldn't be circumcised. So that means to say that he had some kind of a blemish, right, in his character, where he was trying to come to a situation where he shouldn't be circumcised, because being circumcised means that you're close to God, you're close to Hashem, you do the will of Hashem. He was trying to create a situation in his own body, in his own soul, where he tried to cancel out, right, to nullify the Brit Milah that he had on his body. This is the idea that we say, the Chazal teach us, that a person can have Brit Milah and also nullify the Brit Milah as well. This is exactly what happened to Adam Arishon. How did Adam Arishon, the first man, try to nullify his Brit Milah? They say, right, that he separated from his wife for 130 years, and at that time he was going to sleep, and all kinds of demons were coming to him and having all kinds of encounters with him during his sleep, and he was giving birth to all kinds of bad souls because of this. And the reason why this was happening is because he had a problem with his brit. He was not guarding his brit properly because of the separation from his wife, and also because of his lack of belief that he had in Hakadosh Baruch Hu, in God, lack of appreciation for what God gave him, and therefore he was like a denier, a person who wanted to revert back to a situation where he was born in a good situation, he was born on a high level spiritually, but he wanted to make himself on a degraded level. He wanted to bring him down, degrade himself. So Adam Arishon was the first person who had a problem with this, but the truth is, right, that this problem recurs several times in the Bible, as we find with the sons of Yehuda, and Onan. We see that these two young men, they both died because they had a problem with the Brit, right? What does that mean? That they had this wife Tamar, who was the daughter of the Kohen Gadol, of Shem, who was the high priest at that time. She was a very holy lady, this lady Tamar. And therefore what happened was that the first son, didn't want to have children with her for some reason, because he liked her beauty, he wanted to preserve her beauty. So therefore he was not ejaculating inside of his wife. He was spilling it on the ground, and because of that reason, he was wasting his seed. And when a person does that, when he wastes his seed like that, spilling it on the ground, so comes God, as we find there in the Torah, and he killed Er because of the sin of wasting his seed. And this is exactly what we're talking about. We're talking about the issue of pagam brit, harming your brit, harming your circumcision, and this is exactly what this young man did, and he paid for that with his own life. That's what happened. Same thing we find with his brother Onan, that he took her after Er died, so he was the next in line to take her as a levirate marriage, to do yibum with her, but he also had the same problem. He was also spilling on the ground, so therefore, since he also spilled on the ground, HaKadosh Baruch Hu killed him too. So we find over here something very, very, very severe. The Chazal tell us, that a person who does this, who wastes his seed like this and spills on the ground, instead of trying to impregnate his wife, he's like a murderer. This is considered to be the biggest sin in the Torah. So therefore, a person who does that, has to watch out for his life. He could be chas v'shalom, he could be killed, just like Aaron Onan, just like they paid for with their life for that. So it could happen to anybody else as well. Even though they were on a very high level, we can't compare ourselves to them. These people were on a very elevated status. They had they were very holy people. We're not on that level of holiness, but nevertheless, we see in the Shulchan Aruch that says the Shulchan Aruch that a person who wastes his seed like that, whether it's talking about spilling outside, or whether it's talking about masturbation, all these things, this is considered to be like a murder. Why is that? Because he's taking the potential for life that he could have done by having children with this woman, and he's wasting that potential, and therefore, since life is being aborted by his wasting his seed, so therefore comes the Torah and teaches us that this is considered to be the biggest sin in the Torah, right? So big that, as we said, right, these two young men paid for that with their life. So we see, right, that there's a definite great danger and great severity that pertains to this issue of wasting seed, which is also a pagam in the brit, right? This is also a person who's ruining his brit like that. They say, the Chazal, that on the other hand, right, we find that the perfect person who guarded his brit in the Bible, we find the Yosef HaTzadik. He was the one who was able to overcome his inclination regarding what happened with the wife of Potiphar, right? That she was trying to seduce him for a long time. She was trying on over and over and over and over again. She couldn't get to him, and he was able to guard his brit. He was able to guard, and they say the Chazal, because he was able to guard his brit like this and not ruin it by having relations with a married woman like Potiphar's wife, so therefore, because of that mitzvah that he did, because that he guarded himself and he passed this great test, so therefore Kadosh Baruch Hu blessed him with tremendous abundance. Right? What happened was that all the wealth of the world came to Mitzrayim, came to Egypt at that time because they were selling grain. Nobody else had grain to sell besides them. So therefore, Yosef HaTzadik acquired a great deal of wealth and also kingdom power. They say, right, that if a person guards his brit and doesn't do a sin of adultery, God forbid, or some kind of big sin like this, or wasting his seed, or having homosexual relations, things like this, all these things that a person does, these great sins, right, whether it's adultery, or also, right, if it's we're talking about a Jewish guy who goes with a non-Jewish lady or something like that, or the opposite way as well, that we're also talking here about wasting seed, and then we're also talking about the issue of doing these great sins. So therefore, these great sins, what they do is that they harm the brit. And when a person does that, when he does these great sins, what happens is that he loses his abundance, he loses his parnasah, he loses his wealth, all the wealth, the potential that he had to be wealthy, to have abundance and a lot of shefa, a lot of right wealth. All that he loses, it harms him wealth-wise, and also when it comes to his power, it harms him in all these things. He loses his material wealth, and also he loses his material power as well. So therefore, right, we find that Yosef HaTzadik, because he was able to guard his brit, and he was able to be aware of this, so therefore he was able to amass tremendous amount of wealth and also power, became the king of Egypt over there, even though he was not really from that country, he was a foreigner, but nevertheless, because of the great power that he had to guard his brit, to guard his circumcision, so therefore he was able to acquire all that wealth. They say, by the way, something even more profound. They say that Yosef HaTzadik, not only he has this power to be blessed himself because of guarding his brit, we also, all the other tribes as well, of the Jewish people, we need Yosef HaTzadik, who is right, the catalyzer of this whole issue of guarding the brit. He is the one who is the symbol of purity regarding this issue. So therefore, they say that Yosef HaTzadik has the power to bring blessing, the tribes of Yosef, Ephraim and Menashe. They have the power to bring blessing upon all the other Jews as well, all the other tribes as well. And this is the reason why what happened was that when Yehuda and the other brothers, they sold Yosef, and they harmed him by doing what they did, right, to getting rid of him like that, trying to kill him as well, right? They almost killed him as well. So what happened was that because of that, they themselves lost. They were the biggest losers when it comes to that. When they sold him, what happened was that they lost their abundance. They lost their source of wealth and power. So this is exactly what happened, right? They say that Yehuda, who was the king, right, of the brothers, who was the king, nevertheless, he needs Yosef to be that catalyzer of spiritual, right, purity, of guarding the brit, guarding the purity of relations, right? Not having illicit relations. So therefore, since Yosef is the in the Kabbalah, we call this Midat HaYesod, right? It's a part of one of the Sfirot, one of the right Kabbalistic qualities, which is called Yesod. and Yosef HaTzadik is in that quality, and that quality is what brings all the wealth and the abundance into the world. So therefore, what happened was that Yehuda was removed from the kingdom by his brothers after they sold Yosef. You know why? The truth is, right, they were angry at him. They said, why did you, right, allow us to do such a thing like that, to sell him? So what happened was that he lost his kingdom. They kicked him out. They said, you know what, we don't want you to be king anymore because of what you did. What you didn't help us. You didn't save us from the sin of selling Yosef. So what happened was that Yehuda, the fact that they sold Yosef, the fact that they harmed Yosef, it also harmed them back, and this is why Yehuda lost his kingdom because of that. So therefore, right, we see that the quality of Yosef, Midat Yesod, which is the quality that brings all the abundance and wealth into the Jewish people, we need that. All the other tribes need it as well. So therefore, right, we need to have always the tribe of Yosef by us in order to bring that blessing to us. So therefore, if you harm Yosef, you're actually harming yourself. This is exactly what happened with the brothers in Yehuda. So what happened was that Yosef HaTzadik, he was able to guard his Brit, as we said, and therefore he was Zoche, he merited to get all the wealth and power to become king. So says the Zohar Kadosh teaches us that anybody who's able to guard his Brit like that from doing sexual sins, as we said, right, the greatest sins are like adultery or wasting your seed or going with a person who's not Jewish or with a woman who's not Jewish, something like that. This is considered to be the biggest sins. But there's also other sins which are a little bit on a smaller scale, right? For instance, we have the sin of having relations with a Jewish woman without being married, having just a znut, like just some kind of girlfriend, without having official, right, some kind of official deal with her, exclusivity, just going from one girlfriend to another, this girlfriend, that girlfriend. So what happens is that when a person does this, right, he does zinut, even though it's a machloket, it's a dispute amongst the authorities, whether the prohibition of having relations with a Jewish woman, man, Jewish woman, Jewish man, some say it's from the Torah, right? The Rambam says, and according to the Ramban, it's from the rabbis. Nevertheless, either way, a person who does that, says the Zohar Kadosh, he also does harm to his abundance as well. He harms his abundance, he harms his parnasah, he harms the wealth that he's supposed to get, and the wealth becomes nullified. He loses it because of that. This is exactly what happens. There's different levels, right? If a person does a greater sin, so then the harm is even greater. If a person does a smaller sin, relatively, right, they're all sins. It doesn't make any difference. He also does harm there as well. So therefore, if a person really wants, right, to have abundance and get connected with a lot of wealth and all these things, the key element there is to guard the brit. What does that mean? Not to do any kind of sexual sins like these, which can cause a person to lose his abundance, to lose his blessing. This is exactly what they say about David HaMelech as well. What happened was that David, he did what he did, right, with Bathsheba, even though the Gemara tells us in Masechet Shabbat, tells us over there, Tractate Shabbat, that David HaMelech didn't really sin. He didn't really commit the act of adultery. How is that? Because at that time, technically speaking, Bathsheba was not married, because when they went out to war, they had to get to their wife, and therefore, right, she was divorced at that time. But nevertheless, since he did this immoral act of being with Bathsheba, all the while, right, that she was still connected with her husband, Uriah Hitti. So therefore, what happened was, this is exactly the reason why he lost his malchut. He lost his kingdom because of that. That his son Absalom rebelled against him. What caused this rebellion of Absalom that he rebelled against him? He lost his kingdom, even though he retrieved his kingdom. He was restored in the end, but nevertheless, he lost his kingdom. Why did he lose his kingdom? Because he broke the brit, right? He damaged the brit by having relations with Bathsheba, who was, anyway, but technically speaking, she was maybe divorced, but she was still, right, she had a husband who was supposed to come back from the war and remarry her. So therefore, right, we find every time that a person does harm to his brit by doing one of these sins, so we see that he loses his kingdom, he loses his rule, he loses his abundance, he loses all those good things that a person has in life. So it all depends on this quality, Rabbi. It's an unbelievable fact. So therefore, right, the Chazal warn us that a person has to do everything in his power to avoid these kinds of sins. What does that mean? Not to spill seed, right? They say that a person, for instance, there are people, okay, we find, right, in the Shulchan Aruch, a person who masturbates is considered to be one of the greatest sins in the Torah. As we said, it's like murder. But there's also something a little bit less than that. What happens is that sometimes a person brings himself to bad thoughts by having all kinds of thoughts in his head, and because of that, he could come to spill seed, he could come to ejaculate, whatever. So if he loses seed, he loses his semen because of bringing himself to bad thoughts. They say, right, that this also very harmful, and he's considered to be excommunicated. The person who does this on purpose, he does it right to enjoy himself, just have a fun, to have a good time. He does it in order to get some excitement. So if a person does this, and he, because of that, it caused him to lose his seed, he also, right, this is also a great deal of harm in an act like this as well. Also, we find, right, the same thing regarding all kinds of other issues. When a person has relations with his wife, it teaches us the Shulchan Aruch that a person has to be careful always that no matter what he does, right, no matter what he does, he always has to, in the end, he has to be inside his wife in the right place, and he has to deposit his seed over there. If he doesn't do that, if he puts it in the wrong place, what does that mean? Spills it outside, or he comes into a place where that's not the place that he should be coming, to depositing a seed. So this is also considered to be zar lebatala, and therefore, right, the person is also punished regarding that. So a person has to be careful. Whatever he does with his wife, even though, right, there are most things a person is allowed to do with his wife, but since, right, the issue of spilling seed is a big problem. So what we require him is to do is, in the end, when he finishes his act and he actually releases the semen, he has to be inside his wife in the right place, not in the wrong place, right? So not in the wrong situation. So this is the person has to be careful, no matter what he does, whether it's oral sex or whether it's anal, any kinds of things like this. A person has to be careful not to waste his seed. That's what the poskim, the halachic authorities warn us. In any case, a person has to guard that. So the same thing also applies, by the way, something even more intricate over here, which we find in the book Katahayim, in the name of the Ben Ish Chai. Right? Sometimes what happens is that a person has relations with his wife, and after finishing his act of intercourse, what happens is that some seed is still left over, right, inside his body. It doesn't all come out. So what happens is, right, says over there the Kafahayim, that a person who's God-fearing, what he should do is he should stay inside his wife until everything comes out, the last drop. Because if he doesn't do that and he pulls out a little bit too early, what happens is, right, some drops will come out and they will get wasted. So therefore, there's also an element here of wasting your seed as well. Even though this is not the main element, but this is like more chasidut, perhaps, right? It's a little bit more on the side of the stringency. But nevertheless, a person who's very careful about these things, he should also be careful about that. What does that mean? Let him wait until everything comes out and then pull out from his wife. Otherwise, right, he's still got a problem of wasting his seed, even with such a, you would think it's trivial, but this is not actually trivial. This is a very crucial thing. All these things are very crucial. So as we said, Rabbi, when it comes to having relations with his wife, a person has to be careful always. Whatever he does, be careful that don't spill your seed outside, because this is considered to be a person who's harming his brit. This is the idea, Rabbi. So getting back to the issue of the laws of these things. Yes. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, we'll close that. Don't worry. Okay. So, Rabbi, as we said, a person has to be careful regarding these things. There's also the issue of having bad thoughts. A person who also, right, has bad thoughts, they say that this could also bring him to having wasting his seed. So therefore, a person has to be careful to keep his thoughts clean. It says the Zohar Kadosh that a person who is careful to avoid bad thoughts, and therefore he avoids coming to a situation of spilling his seed, what happens is that he gets rewarded with being very, very close to Hashem, being close to God. Because if a person is weak regarding this, and his bad thoughts bring him to spilling seed, so this could cause him, chas v'shalom, right, to lose a lot of good things, as we mentioned. So a person has to be careful regarding that as well. So these things, Rabbatai, regarding guarding a person's brit, a person has to be careful regarding all these things. A person has to be always mindful, and this is a very big challenge. They say about Yosef HaTzadik that even though he was he was successful he passed the trial of the wife of Potiphar. Nevertheless, there was also some kind of a failures there as well. He didn't pass with flying colors like he should have, perhaps, right? He still failed a little bit. What does that mean? That when that whole scene happened, the final day that he was with the wife of Potiphar in the house alone, what happened was that she attacked him. She jumped on him, and she tried to get him to do something, to seduce him to doing something. So they say what happened was that he got really excited, and at that time, even though he didn't have any relations with her, but because of the excitement of what was going on, 10 drops of semen came out of his body. And they say, right, that these 10 drops of semen made him lose a great deal of goodness in this world. What does that mean? They say that if those 10 drops of semen, he would not have lost them, all the 12 tribes of Israel would have come from Yosef HaTzadik only, right? From only from him, not from the other tribes. But since those 10 drops came out, right? So therefore he lost the abundance of having the whole all of the people of Israel coming from him. So what happened was that even though he passed the test, Yosef HaTzadik, nevertheless there was somewhat of a failure there as well, and therefore he had to pay for that. So we find, right, that even though a person may be passing the tests in general, but nevertheless he may have some small failures. We're not perfect. Nobody's perfect. What can we do, right? If Yosef HaTzadik wasn't able to be perfect, how do we expect to be perfect? But we try our best, So the idea is always that a person has to know that when you get involved with these issues, when a person is not careful about these things, it makes him lose everything. So this is exactly what they say, right? The Chazal tell us that what is the success, the kingdom of Rome, right? The Galut of Rome, the final Galut that we're in. What is it that gives the power to the Roman Empire to continue? They say because the Jews are not careful about spilling seed. And this is what gives the abundance and blessing to the Roman Empire to continue, right? The fact that we're not careful about that. So therefore a person has to be very, very careful about that. If he wants to really, solve this problem and bring the Geulah Shlema, if he wants to bring the redemption of the Jewish people, so therefore, in order to weaken the powers of the Yetzer Hara, of the Satan, right, we find the truth is that we find the same thing in our president as well, right? That the president, Trump, that he had ups and downs in his business days, right? Sometimes he was up, sometimes he was down. If you really look carefully, right, the times that he was down was when he was not being loyal to his wife. He was cheating, whatever, on his wife, and those were the times that his also business was falling down and his money was being lost. So even with people like that, right, you see that a person who is losing his good relations with his wife, and he's losing all these things, and he's scattering his seed from here to there, going with other women, right, and being unchaste, and having this kind of a life where he has other people, also other women that he's dealing with, and this can break up the marriage. And what happens is that when a person falls into this trap of being seduced by all kind of women who are not his wife, what happens in the end is that he may come to get divorced, and the divorce, right, this whole issue, what it's going to be is he's going to lose his parnasah, he's going to lose his wealth, he's going to lose his plenty, he's going to lose his abundance. Why is that? Because he wasn't able to stay with one woman, right? We find the same thing with all kinds of other people. You look around, you always find the same thing, right? Whether it's Jewish or not Jewish, when they're not able to stay with one wife, with one mate, and they start to cheat, all kinds of things like this, to run around with all kinds of girls, right? What happens is that they lose their money. Right? We find the same thing with this guy from Amazon, once he started playing around with other women, he lost his wife, he lost a lot of money, he had to settle with her. It's always like that with these wealthy people. These wealthy people, the Yetzer Hara is always trying to get them to lose their money. So what it does is try to get them to sin regarding other women, having another girlfriend, having this, having that, all kinds of things. So once a person makes this mistake of trying to have always these kinds of the relationships, these flings with women, all kinds of things, what happens is they lose his abundance because of that. The Yetzer Hara is trying to get him. So a person who's really, really wise, he has to learn one thing, right, from Yosef HaTzadik. He has to learn that if you really want to have the greatest abundance and the greatest amount of power and wealth and good life, a person has to know one thing: stay with one mate, right? Have your spouse. Stay with your spouse. Don't run around with other people. Because if you get seduced into this, what happens is, right, you could lose your shirt, you lose everything. This is what happens. So a person has to know that life and death hangs on the issue of brit, of guarding your brit. So what happens is, right, that when a person loses his brit, not only he can lose his wealth and abundance. Chazal tell us, right, if a person, let's say, for instance, had took a relationship like this, with a not Jewish woman, and he went and he stayed with her and he went steady with her, whatever, something like this, he could also lose the Olam Haba. Because what happens is, right, that in the end, if a person goes with a non-Jewish woman and he stays with her all his life, he doesn't do tshuva, he doesn't separate from her, so he loses his brit because of that. What happens is that when he gets to Shamayim, when he gets to the Olam Haba, they're going to tell him over there when he gets judged, excuse me, sir, you're not circumcised. What does that mean you're not circumcised? How can it be he's not circumcised? Because he lost his brit. How did he lose his brit? By doing one of these great sins like this and not doing tshuva. He didn't repent. So if a person doesn't repent and goes on with these kinds of sins like this, going with a non-Jewish woman or adultery or homosexual, all kinds of things like this, what happens is that, as we said, right, he's going to lose his money, he's going to lose abundance, that's for sure. But also what he's going to do is he may lose his neshama, he may lose his soul also. That's what happens in the end, right? That's the next step. That a person who doesn't guard his brit, since the Brit Milah is considered to be the most important element of the Jewish people, right, the circumcision, so therefore if a person loses spiritually his Brit, he's also losing his Judaism as well. So they're going to tell him, they say, right, that the Chazal and the Midrash, it says that everybody's going to be, all the Jews that went to Gehinnom, went to purgatory, so what happens is that they're going to come and pull them out. It's going to come Yitzchak Avinu and pull all of them out in the end. Why is that? Because they received their punishment and now they have to go to Olam Haba. They have to get their reward in the world to come. But they say that there's one person who never comes out of there, of the Gehinnom. Who is that? The person who didn't guard his brit and he went with a goya, right? All kinds of things like this. He didn't marry a Jewish woman. He married a non-Jewish woman or something like that. Or he didn't get circumcised also. He never did brit milah. This is the worst because this is not even somebody who rejected his milah. It's somebody who never got milah in the first place. So people like this who didn't get brit milah, or they rejected their milah, they forfeited their milah by doing these kinds of things, what happens is that a person, lo aleinu, chas v'shalom, he can lose everything. He loses Olam Haba, he can lose his Judaism, right? He's considered to be, in the world to come, uncircumcised. Even though he physically was circumcised, what happens is that a person, spiritually, when he does all kinds of things like this, as we mentioned, right, all these severe things, and also not so severe, nevertheless, right, all these things, a person has to be careful about all of them. Because if a person is very, very careless about these things and has no regard for these things, and he thinks, I can just do whatever I want. You can, I can have a girlfriend, I can have this, I can go with different women, I can, this and that, I'll experiment with all kinds of things. It doesn't work like that. A person has to know, right, that Kadosh Baruch Hu wants that, since the whole issue of having relations with a woman is, his purpose is to bring souls into the world, he wants to bring good souls. The one time a person asked me, why isn't it allowed to have, to do prostitution? Why isn't it allowed, these kinds of things? Or to go with different women, different men, all kinds of things. Why not? What's the problem? So, one of the biggest problems with this is that when a person has many partners in these things, what happens is that his thoughts get scattered, from this one to that one, and then they get mixed up. So what happens is that when a person has relations with one person, he's thinking about somebody else, and this causes a great deal of damage to the children because of these thoughts, which are being scattered, diverted from one mate to a different mate. This mate, you don't remember even who you're with anymore, right? You're thinking about this one, you're with the other one, this and that, all kinds of things. All these things cause a great deal of damage in the offspring. What happens is that the offspring turns out to be not holy and to be, right, sinful people, children who are not observant, children who are not God-fearing. This is what happens when a person starts to get involved with all kinds of things like this. Thinking about this one, being with that one, all kinds of confusion. They say that this confusion, by the way, is also very harmful. What happens is that if a person, even with his wife, and he's thinking about a different person when he's with his wife, different woman, he's thinking about somebody else. So this can make the child to be a very big sinner, right? It affects the quality of the child very, very badly, and his child is going to be somebody who's not God-fearing. That's what happens to a person like that who makes this great mistake. So what happens is that a person has to be very careful about what he thinks, because the formation of the heart, 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 the formation of the offspring of the child is very much made, very much effectuated by what he's thinking when he's with his wife. So therefore, the Chazal warn us: don't, when you're with your wife, don't think about somebody else. And also, you should be thinking about good things. Don't think about thoughts of hatred, right, or hating your wife, or being angry at her, or having all kinds of squabbles and all kinds of things. Think good thoughts. You should have a good feelings towards each other when you have to do the act with your wife. What happens is that there's something even worse than that. What happens is that sometimes a person, they say, right, and brought down also in the Sefer Chafahim, let's say a person goes into the street, right, and he sees over there a non-Jewish woman. So what happens is that he checks her out, likes the way she looks. He shouldn't be looking at her, but he made a mistake. So he checked her out, and she also noticed, and she also, looking at him. So they're looking at each other. So they're thinking about each other. He's Jewish, she's not Jewish. So what happens is now a person, says the Kafahim, that person who had these bad thoughts about this woman can go home and have relations with his wife. But he's still thinking about that lady, right? Which we said, right, it's very harmful, as we said. And that lady also is going now home to her husband or whatever, and the mate, and this guy's not Jewish, he's not Jewish also. So what happens is that she's thinking about this Jewish guy, because they were thinking about each other. So what happens now is that there comes to be a switch over here, that the Jewish guy who's with his wife, he's going to have a child who's not going to have a Jewish soul, and therefore he's going to become apostate. He's going to convert to a different religion, God forbid. Why is that? Because he doesn't have a Jewish soul. So they're going to have big problems with him. What caused this? Because when he was with his wife, he was thinking about the non-Jewish woman. So we see, right, that everything goes according to the thoughts, what you're thinking. A person has to have pure thoughts when he's with his wife. So what happens is now, the child that will be born from him is going to be a non-Jewish soul, and he's going to leave Judaism. And now, on the other hand, since this woman who's non-Jewish, right, she was thinking about the Jewish guy, so she's going to have a child who has a Jewish soul. They're going to be switched, in other words, right? The souls of the two children are going to be switched, and what happens is that this person is going to convert to Judaism. Why is that? Because he has a Jewish soul. So in the end, he's going to say, "Oh, I'm Jewish. I want to convert." So why did this happen? As all this whole idea? Because she was thinking about the Jewish guy, and therefore the two, right, the offspring were mixed one with the other. And what happens is now, right, you got the wrong child, and she's got the wrong child. So you're going to both suffer, right? So we see from there again, Rabbi, that what happens is that when a person has improper thoughts during the act of being with his wife, this can cause a great deal of damage to the child. It can make him to a sinner, and therefore a person, right, what should he be thinking when he's with his wife? He should be thinking about the mitzvah of pruvu. He should be thinking about satisfying his wife's needs. This is what he should be thinking about. These are the mitzvot that we're talking about, not just to have all kinds of perverted thoughts in his mind about somebody else, or all kinds of crazy ideas, because this is going to cause damage, as we said. So a person has to know, right, that even when a person is with his wife, he still has to be careful about what he's thinking about and how he behaves as well. There was one lady one time who mistakenly told me, right, I was speaking with her. She said, when it comes to the bedroom, what you do when you do with your wife in the bedroom or your husband, we throw the Shulchan Aruch out. It's not true, right? This is not true. We don't throw out the Shulchan Aruch in the bedroom. There's also many halachot, many laws, Jewish laws regarding how a person behaves in his bedroom as with his wife as well. So therefore, don't throw out the Shulchan Aruch, right? Keep the Shulchan Aruch over there. Just make sure you cover it, right? Because you can't have it uncovered when you're with your wife. So make sure you cover it. But the truth is, right, that you have to have a Shulchan Aruch. The person has to know that the bedroom also has Shulchan Aruch, right? He has to know all these things. As we said, Rabbi, so the two main ideas that a person needs to know is, number one, not to waste a seed. Even one drop of seed you don't want to waste. So therefore, a person has to be careful, right? When you finish, you have to be inside, in the right place, as we said, right? If you're in the wrong place, no good, right? It's considered to be wasted seed. So a person has to know how to do and what to do, and he has to be very careful, because sometimes you can have accidents also, So a person has to not get too crazy, not get carried away. A person has to know that there's limitations, there is a Shulchan Aruch, and we have to know what we're doing, we have to be cognizant, we have to be aware, we have to be alert. And this is the way a real Jew, a God-fearing Jew, has to live his life. And this is what we call guarding the Berit. What does that mean, to guard the Berit? That means that a person is always careful about these two things, right? One is that he should never waste his seed, God forbid, and put it in the wrong place at the wrong time, whatever it is. and he shouldn't bring himself to do that by all kinds of bad thoughts or all kinds of issues, right? Talking with women we have no business talking with them, flirting with them. Flirting also can bring a person to this kind of thing. He starts to flirt with a woman, and then because of the flirting, right, you can have some kind of seed coming out. You can have a ejaculation because of that. What's the reason why this happens? Because he's not careful how he behaves. He's not careful how he conducts his life like that. Right? This is exactly why the Chazal told us that a person has to be also careful about not touching and not kissing and hugging, all these things, because all these things can also bring a person to waste his seed. Bad thoughts, kissing, hugging, touching, all kinds of things like this. So what should a person do? Right? Wait till you get married. Wait till you have a holy relationship with your wife, and then you can do what you have to do. But there's a Shulchan Aruch. You shouldn't think that there's no Shulchan Aruch in the bedroom. There is a Shulchan Aruch in the bedroom. For sure there is, and it's quite intricate and it's quite complicated. So a person has to know what he's doing. A person has to know that the quality of the children depends on how he behaves in the bedroom. So if he wants to have good children, he wants to be proud of them, he wants that they should be smart and sharp and good behavior and good midot and good character, and right, they treat him with respect, they treat him with kabod. How does a person produce a child like that? By guarding the Berit, by guarding the bad thoughts, by guarding, right, not wasting seed, all kinds of things like this, having the proper thoughts, having the proper intentions. All these things make the act with his wife into a very, very holy institution, right? You know that the truth is, according to the Kabbalah, a person who has relations with his wife, if he does it the right way, this is considered to be a very, very holy act, right? One of the most holy things that there is, because this makes a yichud, it makes some kind of unification in Shemaim, in the heavens, and it has a very good effect on the world. So therefore, right, having the proper relations with his wife is considered to be a great, great mitzvah. This is why, right, the Chazal told us, don't skip this mitzvah, don't skip over. When it's time to do it, you have to do it, right? What does that mean? Do it the proper way, with the proper intention, with proper thoughts, and proper deeds, right? Be careful, as they say, right? One friend used to tell me, right? Don't be sorry, be careful, right? Be careful, don't be sorry. You shouldn't come to being sorry. Be careful. If you're going to be careful, then you won't be sorry in the end. Baruch Adonai le'olam. Amen ve'amen. Chazak u'baruch. Chodesh tov. Thanks for coming.